The committee meeting for Thursday, September 4th, 2025. I'd like to begin with the land acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, live, and learn. I'm going to follow that up by our Indigenous and Human Rights Statement. The Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subject to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to providing learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from all forms of discrimination, oppression, harassment, and okay. We're going to move on to our roll call. We have regrets tonight from Rowan Jarvis. And we'll begin our roll call.
I'm Jen McLaughlin representing Solana.
I am Shauna Haley. I'm representing the Grandview Family Advisory Council.
I'm Jessica Wells, member at large.
I'm Donna Edwards, trustee for Ajax.
Kelly Miller, trustee for Ajax.
Michelle Arsenal, trustee for WIC.
Elizabeth Daniel, member at large.
Tara Pelly, Durham Down Syndrome Association.
Sensor Annette Brown, Autism Ontario.
Connor Jenkinson, System Lead Principal, Inclusive Student Services.
Allison Amer, Easter Seals.
Joe Ridley, Brand New System Lead, Durham Report.
Charmaine Brown, interior parents of visually impaired children.
Anthony Phelan, Durham Secondary Schools.
Kim Erger, elementary school representative.
Nancy Adams, also new system lead for Inclusive Student Services.
Lisa Rye, recording secretary. And Laura Bliss, new superintendent for Inclusive Student Services.
Eva Kyriakides, Association for Bright Children, and SEAC Chair. Okay, we're going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Before we do that, I'd like to add under the correspondence the letter that was just distributed from the Association for Bright Children. If everybody's okay with that change, or is it has any comments on that, please feel free to speak now. If not, can we get a motion to amend the agenda to add that? And Donna, second, Tara. Okay, can we get a motion to approve the agenda? Allison, seconders. Kelly, all of it. Okay, all in favor? Okay. Motions are passed. Then has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from our June 5th meeting? Seems like so long ago. Does anybody have any questions or concerns with respect to those minutes? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Sensor Annette, seconders. Tara Pelly, all in favor? Motion passed. Okay. Moving on then to our review of SEAC obligations and responsibilities and meeting structure. We just we're sort of going over because over the years we've had a lot of people join, and we just thought trying to find ways to sort of streamline our meeting and make sure things move in a timely sort of manner. Because many people, there's a few that joined initially through COVID, and that was all crazy, and then coming back in person. So we attached a link with respect to the SEAC obligations and responsibilities, just talking about meeting absences, making sure that we provide regrets if you can't make it, and seeing if your alternate can attend in your place. It's not always possible if it's last minute for the alternate to attend, but that's sort of the point of having them. So the more often they can attend, the better. Talking about quorum, which is, you know, in order to pass any motions, we have to have quorums to do any business. So certain months of the year, December in particular is actually a really important meeting because that's our organizational meeting. So where, you know, your chair and your vice chair and that are appointed. If we don't have quorum, the chair can continue a meeting, but it's an information meeting only. And that meeting has to be made up because we have to have 10 in the legislation, we have to have 10 SEAC meetings a year. And that with quorum, basically it's not considered a meeting if it's just for information. Raising discussion topics. We're talking about, you know, on sort of making it a little bit different for the area when it comes to the community concerns, just to make sure that we have the board can have, like Lauren can have information ready for us if there's questions that come out from a community member, to submit that to Lisa and Lauren. You can copy me, and then that way when we come to that portion, they're ready to respond, as opposed to having anything, you know, have to get back to you or have to look into that sort of thing. And the other sort of big thing is following sort of the, you know, making sure we all, when we're having questions and like the question periods or portions to raise our hand so that we go sort of in a turn so that everybody has an opportunity to share their voice and keep that discussion flowing and make sure that we're covering everybody. And I'll do my best to try and get through the room. If I'm missing anybody, feel free to point that out because there's often a large number here. Okay. Does anybody have any sort of input on that they'd like to bring up, or anything they have to suggest to help the meetings run smoothly? Since we're not.
I just wanted to remind us that the association would like to usually submit before the meeting so that we.
That's right. Yes, that's right. So yeah, if your association has any events coming up or things that they want, you know, sort of to be brought forward and for information at SEAC, yeah, for sure. And if you guys could submit that as well to Lisa and copy to me ahead of the meeting, and then we'll make sure that that information gets out for the public, right? Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I'm just wondering if there's like a process for us to give input into the presentations at different meetings throughout the year.
So the presentations we usually follow with sort of questions and answers, and then if there's more to submit, sometimes we're trying to like stay within a time, like keep things confined within a time frame. We often will say afterwards, like if you have anything else to submit, to send it to Lisa and Lauren directly, copy to myself, and that can be shared amongst the SEAC members as well for information purposes, just to you know, sort of keep things and sometimes you don't think of something it's longer, right? And then you want to sort of let them know that, so you can always feel free to do that.
Okay, I was thinking more just about like the topics that are, you know, how there's like different presentation topics throughout the year. If there was, I just don't know, is there a process for getting input from SEAC or like what we'd like to hear about, or is it just decided?
No, we've often had meetings where we've said, what do we want to hear? Like, what do we want to bring forward? And I think we've done that sort of not right at the beginning, but usually sort of after the organizational meeting. I think we sort of said, what do we want to bring forward for the next little while? Unless there is specific, the presentations sometimes though are come down based upon what the board, like what's being worked on at the board. So they're looking for the consultation on those particular items, but we have in the past requested specific presentations to come forward. Like I believe October, there's going to be one on the early years and kindergarten. So, and what that curriculum stuff looks like. So I think if there is anything you're particularly interested in, you can feel free to email myself and with copies then, and we can look at where we can fit those presentations in. We're always happy to have the input of what people want. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay, then we're going to move on to the staff report.
Okay, so we welcomed over 81,000 students this week to our schools, and approximately 13,130 staff. So we wanted to extend a thank you to families and staff who supported that positive return for our students, including those who transitioned to some new classrooms and new spaces and new schools. We had 2 new schools that opened this week. And we had all hands on deck, from facilitators to superintendents to system leads to even architects, helping get kids to the right spaces in our school this week. So it was a really positive start. Connor is going to start us off with 2 of our first items on the staff report, and then I'll finish up with the last one.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. As part of that welcome, it's always nice here, and actually I heard it a couple of times in this space as well, the Happy New Year. There's education is unique in the sense that you always get that chance to start again. You always have that chance to be able to do things differently, to be able to look at things in different ways. And I also have that moment that for some students, this is their final year. And for some students, this is their first year in the system as well. And that's always one of those big things about the experiences. And it's incredible the amount of learning that students actually do each and every year when they enter the system. I want to say as well that part of what we've been doing is we've definitely been working hand in hand with a lot of components with our facilities team. I always want to say a big thank you to our facilities team during startup as well, because they work tirelessly throughout the facility to ensure that our learning environments are ready for our learners. And actually this year they completed a really large number of projects that were directly in support of students with special education interest, strengths, and needs, and just also very large projects across the entire system. And again, it's a big tip of the cap to that team, because they work very tirelessly to make sure that the buildings were in tip-top shape and shining and amazing for our students when they came back in. So a big thank you to all of our facilities team, and again, all of our Edge Center team who also worked tirelessly throughout the summer to make sure that things such as staffing and things were in place so that, again, our learners were greeted in the most meaningful and best way possible. As well as a thank you to DSTS, our Student Transportation Services, to continue to look and monitor and try to adjust busing routes and trying to work throughout the summer. This is always their extremely busy time throughout the year as well. And they're working extremely hard. And it was a department we are in extremely regular conversation with them throughout this entire week and then lead up to the school year as well. So again, just always appreciative of that collaboration that we do have with our transportation partners as well. So in this, we also want to highlight, as we always do, I can't believe we're on volume 3 of our impact updates. So this is now our 3rd year presenting our impact updates to SEAC, and I bring that as well. We wanted to highlight our regular class placement as an item as well, because we recognize the vast majority of our students with special education interests, strengths, and needs access our regular class placement. And we also understand and know it's considered our most inclusive of all of our placements as well. And that looks like our full school team accessing, supporting, and being with students as well, with a real focus on learning programs, such as a big focus on universal design for learning, and those principles being put into place. Small group supports within the classroom, as well as targeted small group instruction and intervention within the classes, and the leveraging technology to provide instruction throughout the classroom as well as that universal navigation and the support, and the ongoing program and support from special education resource teachers or CERTs around the team, our inclusive student services school team members as well, and Again, with that informed consent and collaboration with all of our community partners who also play a huge part in our students' success. So just a little bit more around that regular classic and direct support placement. It's nothing that is new to SEAC. We've had lots of conversations around that placement and what that actually means. But again, this is a really important information item for our families and for our system as well. So when we think about regular classic and indirect support, that indirect support is something that is often one that we have questions. We often have lots of questions about it. And what we really want to understand is that there are extremely valuable support staff roles who play really integral moments and roles within our students' educational journeys and experiences. So these include our ASL interpreters, so automatic sign language interpreters, educational assistants, or interveners. They are integral in supporting well-being, safety, self-care, and learning. But these roles are not part of that reference to that indirect support. The indirect support, as part of that IPRC, the Individual Placement Review Committee, in accordance with all the applicable legislation, is specifically referring to teachers with special education qualifications. So that is where that CERT, that special education resource teacher, is playing that indirect role in support of the students through that classroom teacher, through that classroom team, and the team that is around them. We also have to remember that as part of Regulation 18198, we always have to consider regular class replacement first and foremost. We have to put that at the forefront when we are making decisions as committees around that. So we always have to look at that, and we always have to look at where those services and where that can be met, and all those educational abilities and all those educational outcomes can actually be met within that particular placement as well. And that's an important consideration. We also want to say that really the highlight is the fact that the regular class placement with indirect support is most inclusive, because it really allows students to remain within that community classroom. I call it the playground classroom, in the sense where we want families to be able to connect around the playground. We want them to be able to be in community, to be in space with one another, and to be able to be connected with each other in that community. And that homeschool community is a vital connection for all of our families and for our students to be part of that. So we really know, because it fosters that peer interaction and that shared learning as well. I love always, the biggest thing for me is always reading the highlights at the end of the quotes from the system that we're able to garner. So I encourage everybody to take a read of some of those as well. So with that, I will hand that back over.
Thank you, Connor. I'm just going to highlight two. We have two program reviews that I just want to give you a quick update on. So I know it was brought forward last year that we undertook a review of the deaf, hard of hearing program. So just a quick update where we're at. We have partnered with Dr. Joanne Weber from the University of Alberta and Dr. Joanna Cannon from the University of British Columbia. So they were in our spaces back in May and gathering data to determine what's working and what's not. The intent is really to determine what does an inclusive learning environment look like for deaf and hard of hearing students. And so we are at the point where we're expecting they've gathered the data, and we're expecting that review, some information from that review, to be coming back to us this fall. And so we'll sit down on top of the data that was collected by that team. We're going to sit down with the students themselves, because their lived experience in those spaces is really what is pivotal to the next step. If we want to know what works for them, we need to ask them. So we'll endeavor to do that. Their input will be pivotal in shaping the future of our program and meeting their needs. So this data that we're going to collect is in alignment with our strategic priorities and will, as I said, move us forward in programming. In terms of gifted review updates, I know that I was here at the table last year when we committed to a review of how program placement decisions were made for our gifted learners and for those who have been identified. So we are in the initial stages. I wanted to share with you initial stages of planning the process of what that's going to look like and what our responsibilities are as a district to ensure that our students are properly served. And as part of that process, we wanted to share that meaningful consultation with families, with parents, with students, and with practitioners who work alongside our students. That will be pivotal to the work that we do. We also want to make sure that we're reading current research, so that will also be part of the process and an important part of the design process. We don't have all the bits and pieces worked out yet, but we're starting the process of moving forward. And I just wanted to bring it to the table today. So we will continue to update SEAC with process details.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on some of Connor's comments, please. So I appreciate everything you said about the regular class placements being inclusive. I do agree with that as a bigger picture item. I want to remind the board that inclusion without support is actually just abandonment. I know that I understand the term of indirect support, and I understand there's a lot of confusion with parents around what that looks like. I feel like the board needs to find a way to improve communication with families, because I've been hearing from a lot of families over the summer about what EA support actually looks like for their child. Because I don't think it's okay to say we're being inclusive, your kid's in a regular class, but I can't guarantee any kind of support for your child. Everything depends on what happens next year. And this is for children who are non-speaking, who are not toileted, who have intensive physical disabilities and support needs. And there's nothing communicated. They're just like, well, indirect support means they're going to be supported in the regular class, but they might not get any EA time. We can't guarantee it. I don't think it's okay to be hearing from families that your children are on modified days and that they're in a regular class, but they have to be on modified days. And part of the regular everyday plans that the parent picks them up at lunchtime because they can't be managed at school in a regular class. I don't think that that's inclusion. I don't think it's okay to have safety plans for children that list parents picking them up if the school can't manage them as kind of a cop-out. I don't call that inclusion. So if that's what we're calling inclusion, then I feel like there's a problem in the board. And I feel like either we need to look at how can we actually include these children with different placements, or how can we better support them in a regular classroom where they're actually being supported. Because when we're documenting on paper that they actually can't be supported in the classroom, then that's not inclusion anymore. The regulation that you mentioned at the very end of it, after it says preferences for inclusion in regular class, it also says, goes on to say, based on parent preference. So if we have parents that we're not communicating the level of support to them, and they're uncomfortable with their child being in a regular class because of that, and they're preferring a different placement, I don't think it's okay to not have a placement available for them. And for them to be at IPRC appeals where we're saying we don't have a grade 1 small class placement available to you, or we don't have a kindergarten small class placement available to you. Because I don't think that's following the spirit or really the letter of that regulation. I'd also like to follow up because it was kind of touched on here as well. The ministry regulates, is it 5 different types of placements that boards have to offer? And I don't understand how in this board we can have 2 of those, which is regular class with withdrawal assistance and regular class with resource support, and say we only deliver those. And is it the blind to low vision students who get that support, or the deaf, hard of hearing who get it through an itinerant? And that's the only way those 2 different programs are being delivered. I'm confused about how that's following the ministry guidelines.
So, here you go. A lesson.
I was just going to say, Shauna, some of those concerns that you have raised, and I do have a response to
Okay.
quite a few of those plans per se.
Sure.
I certainly don't want to push you to the bottom of the agenda, but I do have a prepared response that rather than responding to twice, I have to do that now. We would offer correspondence. If,
Community concerns?
yes,
Yes,
sir. Do you want anything there? Or just,
we can do either one. I just wanted to address it because the comments were said. I know parents have been coming to me with these concerns, so I don't want them
Okay,
to
so why
see
don't
me sitting
we
here and just.
circle back around under community concerns and address specific things under that? And,
is that okay?
yeah, okay, yeah. If that was submitted for community concern, so I want to make sure we get that. Since we're now,
I just wanted to put some weight behind the questions that Shauna brought forward. Eva, I did say to you that I was to call you this week to talk to you about some concerns and see how they can be brought forward around the table. And she has mentioned some. I too am hearing from families same concerns about placement, about support looks like. That's caveat that says indirect support comes from the search, and there's no talk about the EA, communication about that support, communication behind when board supports and access in class. And of course, that's when we're having that precludes certain levels of support for specific purposes.
anybody else? Some?
Just a comment though, when it comes to from a community perspective is that there are, especially when we have students moving in from other boards, or the expectations or the understanding of how the Durham District School Board does things is also different from other boards. And part of it is because there is no service delivery standard in education, although broken record, there's a bunch of recommendations that were put forward and it's not being addressed. But so that's the other thing, is being able to clearly understand, to ensure that parents, especially coming into the board, have a clear understanding of the differences. Like I say, this is what we need. So they might have a different understanding when it comes to, basically regular class sizes with indirect support or direct support. They have different understandings because those boards may have provided different services under those terms.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? Allison?
I'll just also go on record as lending weight to what Sean has said from personal experiences as well. And I think what really struck me is how hard it was for me to get answers as a former teacher, as a professor and a faculty of education. And I struggled to get answers just with respect to, can you give me a ballpark figure what kind of support you might get? And I got the sense from the principal that there was a directive not to commit to anything, and I just kept hitting a wall. And I thought it would be so helpful if the principal could just say, well, something in the range of this number of hours, or this is what we were able to offer last year. I can't commit that we can do that again this year. But to be told in March or April, we won't be able to tell you anything till the last week of August is really hard, especially when you're dealing with a nonverbal child who will not be able to communicate how long they sat in an unchanged diaper, for example. So I really felt that there was just a lack of sensitivity there, that it could have just been framed in a much more supportive way, rather than, I can't say anything, we don't know till the end of August, which is very little compensation or very little comfort for a caregiver.
Yeah, and I know when we've spoken about the regular class placements around this table in the past, I remember Andrea McCauley using the language as many sounded. So she would say that the majority of students can be placed in regular class placement. Some require support, and few have a specialized class placement. And I would just be aware that when we get these ideas about this sort of hot topic and the buzzwords like universal design and inclusivity, that we don't over apply or use it too broadly without the appropriate consultation or thought, because we do still have those kids who require specialized assistance or who require the support. So we have to just be aware of whatever we're doing, whatever language we're applying to, we're always putting the children's needs first and foremost, and it may not always be able to fit into a pigeon. Okay, so I'm pleased to see that there's going to be the gifted and deaf hard of hearing reviews. I think that this collaborative approach, including literature, that's the way that we need to really cautiously move forward with any sort of changes in regulations that happens. So we do a lot of things that will come in.
Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? And I'd like to take a minute then for myself. This regular class placement, see it in many respects. The ideas of it is it's the gold standard, right? That's what the hope is. But the problem with it is sort of a utopia. Teachers, and we know, they're juggling a lot of things. They're often have kids at grade level, above grade level, below grade level, right? And they're juggling a lot in those classrooms, including behaviors and different things, especially as the kids move along through the grades. We need to make sure that proper actual plans for how these things are done are always going forward, because all too often, and I'm pretty sure any representative sitting around this table has heard it from parents and likely also have experienced themselves, where you're said, this stuff will happen, they'll be supported, and then you come to find out it's not happening, right? And there's a variety of reasons it doesn't end up happening in a class, but you can have an IEP and it can be the best written IEP, but if it is not out with copy stains on it being used and looked at on a regular basis, it is just another piece of paper in a file. And I fear that that's often the case, right? And so I think that we have to make sure that when we're talking about the focuses and the universal design for learning and being able to specifically say to parents what that looks like for their child in their classroom every day, right? Because it's not enough to have a child just kind of go through the system to the end. It's growth and learning and development each year, right? And those IEPs and goals and strengths and needs should be changed every year. They should be really looked at and not just sort of that IEP reissued, which many parents will say happens all too much. So we really need to be careful, right? So we're looking at OREG 180, 198 and the concept behind inclusivity, that we're actually really trying to make that an inclusive environment, not just a child being placed in a room, right? So I think that's really important. And then going back to the gifted review, I'm really glad to hear that community is going to be brought in, student voice is going to be brought in to that review, because I think it's really important for the board to hear from, especially the kids that are currently in the program and the difference that has made for some of them. Because for some of them, that's been a lifeline. It's been a social lifeline that this plan wouldn't actually have provided for them, right? It's the sort of the regular class placement wouldn't have, provided for them. So we need to make sure that, like all identifications, we are looking at an individual child and not a broad preference. And I think that's what a lot of this comes down to, because when we often are missing that piece where we're not looking at the individual, we're saying, well, this is the standard, this is what we should be doing, and we're going to do that. no matter what, unless we have, every reason not to, basically, every box tick. There's lots of reasons parents choose what they choose. And I think we need to really make sure that we're listening to those reasons. Each child is being looked at individually, regardless of the identification. So, and as you know, even from emails, like parents are engaged in this, very engaged. So, so I'm glad to hear that we're going to do that, but definitely student voice and parent voice needs to be a big, that review, in any review for any of the programs that we have to make work. Does anybody else have anything to add? Okay, Tara?
Sorry, I wasn't going to, because everyone's basically said a lot of the same things, but I think I wanted to touch a little bit on one of the things that Allison had commented on, was that some of the experiences and I've heard this from the parents as well, is that administration, when they're having this conversation, the board said this, and that kind of speaks back to there's a blanket policy, and either it is a misinterpretation or not going down deeper into it. Let's drill this down into what's best for the child, sort of thing. I'm wondering if that is just another place of capacity building, just understanding, yes, this is the guideline. However, reason why it makes sense not to. And some of the conversations that I've had was saying, if we actually tell the board that we're doing this, we get slapped. And I'm like, that doesn't seem right either, that we shouldn't be afraid to stand out and do what is correct and what's best for this individual student, because it's what's best for them, for fear that there's going to be something coming down from the board, which I would be shocked if it did. But if that's the sense that they have, perception is reality, right? In a lot of cases. So if that's those conversations and that discussion about, I think that needs to be brought forward as well. That may solve a couple of scenarios. We say, oh no, we can't do that. So then you get those unwillingnesses to find and look for those creative solutions. I have had both sides, but with Adam's career, where I literally walked into JK and I had the cert. God bless this woman. Mrs. Blue was the most amazing cert ever. She walked into, oh, I got your thing from resources. I already know which teacher we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. You're going to go here. Come to the orientation. You're going to come see this. We're going to give Adam a social story book. You're going to read it to him over the summer. And she already had it. It was fantastic. And it was one, oh my God, like scary thing. And Adam's needs are not nearly as horrifically large as some of the students that we support are here. And I felt so right after that. And then I've had other situations where I'm like, why is this like talking to a brick wall? Have everything that he's been through the last 6 years. Why is this so hard? Why are you not believing me when we say this is a problem, we need to solve this? I've seen both sides on one kid. I can't even imagine anybody new coming into the state who does not speak English as a first language, who does not understand what their rights and things are. I can't even imagine what that is. We need to build the capacity in the system as well to make sure that the execution is the good side all the way around for every kid, for every parent. Thank you. So,
anything else to add? I would like to add just one thing to that. Sorry, I'm never getting out of this meeting. You can go first, and then I can go. Go ahead. I want to do this. Okay, that's fine. What I would like to add to that is I feel that there should be a guideline, a process of how we're bringing an already identified child into the system, whether it's kindergarten or into grade 1, where there is a proper consultation with the various levels, including services at the board, and what does this child need? What do we have that we're able to offer? And it should be something that happens, right? Like, this child has identification. This is what we're going to start. We're going to do. We're sitting down. We're planning this together, because I think that's a really important factor.
My comment will come at the.
The topics that were brought up were very heavy. Things that are going to take a lot of effort and a lot of work to some change. I'd like to see these topics be brought back with some solution building, some planning, some change. So I just want to see more informed, just as state.
It's not an overnight solution, but I think we need to start working on some of that. It's hard work, but it has to happen. Okay. All right, then we are going to move on to the board reports.
Just yesterday, we had a special board meeting, as well as our whole standing committee meeting, but our special board meeting was to welcome the appointment of Dr. Chad Cowie as our First Nations representative trustees on the board for the remainder of this term, the 2022-26 term. And that appointment was done in accordance to the Ontario Regulation 46297, Section 188 of the Education Act, as far as appointing a council, the appointment of the council of the province of Cougar and his First Nations to the board. We are so pleased to have that voice around the table as far as that's concerned. And it aligns again with all our commitments through our strategic plan and under our commitments under upholding the principles and our principles and responsibilities under the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, which is UNDRIP, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls for action on the board's Indigenous education policy. So we're just so pleased that we have, as that was, he was sworn in. Dr. Cowie was sworn in last night. And just a little bit of information about him is that he's an assistant professor in the political science department at the University of Toronto. He has served as a junior researcher for policy analyst for the Chiefs of Ontario. So he has a lot of policy experience and his research that he does. So again, just a wealth of knowledge and experience that will be coming to the table. Just on a note on that though, under the Education Act is something that the SEAC should now that, I mean, it should have been considered before, but now that we have an appointment of an Indigenous trustee, there should be an Indigenous representative at SEAC. It doesn't have to be the trustee. It could be anybody else, but we should, under the Education Act and the regulation, we should have an Indigenous representative here at the table to fulfill those obligations. So that's something that SEAC should basically, and staff maybe take back to the council, have it here. So that's the consideration from that. And then as far as the standing committee meeting, we had a couple of presentations. It was very light actually, but we had a couple of presentations. One was from Teachers Mentors Abroad, which is a program where teachers at Costa Rica, I believe, they go to. Did I get it wrong?
Dominican Republic.
That's it. Yeah, Dominican Republic, and then they said they go on their own accord, and they provide basically professional development and support in the Dominican Republic, and it's been going on for quite a few years. It actually was initiated through the DDSB a long time ago, and it's developed into the Teachers Mentors Abroad. So it was just an update. We have many teachers that have gone to the Dominican Republic and have increased their experience and so forth and brought back to the DDSB. The other one was we had a community presentation around French immersion, actually in Ajax and beyond, which was really good. Again, looking at equity around French immersion, but also looking at basically balancing enrollments, not only in Ajax, but across the board to increase accessibility and equity of French immersion. So that present was done to the community. And let's see, I'm just looking. Of course, we also welcome our new student trustees to the table as far as things are, and looking forward to a lot of the things that they bring forward. They were very well organized. They had their speeches, they, and so forth. It was really, really great. And I think that's much, yeah,
Those pretty much the meet every
best things. Yeah, there was a lot of memos, letters and memos. Yeah, that was it.
Does anybody have any questions or comments with respect to the board reports? I do like the idea of reaching out to the council, the band council, to see if they have anybody they'd like to put forward as a member of SEAC. I think it's a great voice to have, regardless of whether it's trustee or not, right? So if we can reach out to the band and ask them if they'd like to put somebody forward, that would be fantastic. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, we will move on then to our consultation regarding teaching and learning policy with Aaron Elmhurst, the superintendent of education, and Mohammed Hamid, superintendent of education.
You're ready to play. Your support is leaders. You always bring choice. And playing is learning. So thank you all so much. And we've also got engagement for them and bringing out shopping. So I just shopping more. My engagement's name and plan. So that just brings me in the space in a good way. My title here at the Durham School Board is Aaron Elmhurst, and I'm the superintendent for teaching and learning, which includes early years, literacy, and K-8. So happy to be here today. Happy to have a bit of a conversation with all of you. Gather your thoughts, gather your thinking, and engage in a little bit of play. Look ready. You're all ready. We'll get there. I know that it is first week of school on the Thursday night, so I get that feeling as well. So I'll try to move fairly quickly so that we don't take up a lot of time in your agenda. So today, what we're going to be talking about is we are going to shortly be in the process of developing a teaching and learning policy. So as many of you know, we have Indigenous education policy, human rights policy, and safe and respectful workplace. Within the district, we call those our big three. Those are the big three policies that guide all that we do. The hope is we move toward the large overarching teaching and learning policy, which really includes all that happens in classrooms for learning for kids. Now, overarching vision. And so part of that work right now is meeting with different groups and individuals to seek input on the key things and ideas that we might want to consider in that policy development. And of course, your voices are extremely important in that. As we begin to think about, really at this point, it's key themes that maybe in the policy, as we know, trustees are key holders of policy. As staff, we look into procedure, we build what goes alongside that, but we want to ensure that there's collective thinking that we bring forward before that development starts. So that's why we're here today, to get you right at the forefront, get your ideas and make sure that it lives within policy development. So we have a bit of a guiding question today, and our guiding question for us in thinking about a teaching and learning policy, the experiences of kids in classrooms and learning spaces every day, what qualities and conditions create an ideal classroom or a learning environment where all students experience belonging, engagement, and positive learning? So if you had to, in your mind,
just think about what that experience might for some look like, for some feel like, for some sound like. What would that be? And we're actually going to give you a little bit of opportunity to chat and play with that in small groups. So we brought for you today some toys. So sometimes we'll work with students of all ages, just to kindergarten. Secondary folks love it. Well, we often ask them to think about a guiding question like this and to create something that shows their thinking in a way that they would like. And sometimes we use loose parts to do that. And so for me, this little loose part right now might be a tree. And I've decided that these are where my trees are, and that outdoor learning is a really important part of an ideal classroom or of an ideal learning environment for kids. I may also decide that a caring adult has to be in every learning space. And so I may decide that a caring adult is this pink rock. And we would build out what we think would be within that learning environment for kids. So I guess I'm doing this on my own today. I will share loose parts. And maybe in a group, you're going to do something with loose parts and build what this would look like in that way. And maybe you're thinking it's Thursday and it's the first week of school. I'm a little bit tired. That's okay too. You may also choose to have a chart paper and write notes together. You may also choose to write on sticky notes your thoughts. And maybe you choose to do it on your own. We are going to ask folks to kind of chat together, but if you're kind of in a time where you just want to do that thinking on your own, that's okay too. So we'll pass out a variety of resources, and then we will just let you, if you kind of just look to the people in your elbow partners, probably 4 or 5, you can move somewhere else in the room. You don't have to stay where you are. We will give you, we're not going to give it a long time. I know I have a bit of a time limit, but we will give you, I'm going to still do 7 minutes. Good. 7-ish minutes for you to kind of think about what that would look and feel like, and then build it. Right now, document what this particular one. Questions? I'm a little confident. Pardon me? Whoever's first around, you can start chatting, and then you can start to be talking about this. I just want this. Let's make you guys
Please keep your attention for 1 second.
Sorry. Thank you. While we go through this exercise, we're just going to turn the cameras off because it's going to get loud and chaotic, and it will be pretty much an audible line, and we'll come back and share some of the thoughts following the discussions. Okay? Just. Yes.
So it may be joy, it may be flexible environment, whatever your key themes were. I'm gonna record them. Well, Lisa will record them as well. We'll send them out. And then once you read that and you have a little time, if you think, you know what, this doesn't capture this. This doesn't capture this. Please feel free to respond with some additional input. And we'll make sure it's added to the key themes and ideas that we want to inform the policy. All right. So I think usually, so Anishinaabe folks and Mohawk folks go different ways around the circle. And we actually argue about it. So if there aren't any Haudenosaunee folks in the room, then we'll go the Anishinaabe way. So you can start. Anyone from this table or this group that has a key theme?
So maybe I'll do the one we didn't get a chance to talk about really quickly. So a while back, I read an article which I've been trying to find and can't remember what it was called. And it was best practices for teachers to engage the other students in a classroom with the child who has the disability. And it just really struck me the extent to which the child with the disability is often only interacted with by adults, the EA that comes in, the special education person. But for the kids to say, you know, oh, hey, I'll push his wheelchair down to French class, or, you know, I'll help them, I'll go with you to the change table or whatever. So if I can find that article, I will share it with Lisa. But that would be training that I would love to see all teachers have.
Perfect. So I did a little translation up here, okay? Yep. Add to it. So I'll keep adding some more information. But one key theme for a really impactful learning environment is meaningful relationships, where all students interact and support students with special educational learning needs. Is that what you want to say?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. And with that, of course, comes training for teachers. That's the how do we make it happen? That's the procedure part. The thing is, this is what we want. How do we make it happen? Move the next piece. Thank you for that. I'm going to try to capture it as the next person is sharing, or if you have another idea. I cannot write and think at the same time, so I may have to come back and fill it in later. Whoever is next, feel free.
That was good. Okay, so we had three main concepts. One person spoke about caring, showing the care, and we wrote it down as caring as an action, not just as a thought. Another one brought up the experience she had where she really felt the characteristics of empathy shown in accommodation being made before any accommodation requests happened, which made the room, it set the stage for a non-judgmental experience because they were considerate of the possible needs, just not the identified needs, which also allowed the families to have that of shoulder release and relaxation. And another one was relationship. And relationship wasn't just singular, it was the staff's relationship with their support team partner, with their understanding of policy and implementation, with the child who needs the support, the relationship with child on child, the relationship with the engagement and the activities in the room, the whole encompassment of relationships in every day. Awesome. And then the two other words were just trust and humanity.
Humanity is actually some of the key words on some of our slides for consideration that I removed at this point, but we really talk a lot about, just trying to find the actual language we've been using. That humanity, that dignity, like maintaining the dignity of all students at all times, honoring humanity. So I really like that. So when we say caring as an action, I just want to clarify this caring, I'm assuming, is adult, student, student, adult, student, student, like the big picture of caring. Okay. I think I have most of it, and if not, Lisa does.
Or you too.
This is why we capture ideas in lots of ways.
We can put the sticky notes.
All of the things would be great. All of those regulations I appreciate. Good. Next one.
Yeah, okay. One of the things that came up is seeing strengths and recognizing differences. Okay, and then Another one was that came up a lot. We talked about connection and connecting to the students' natural environment. A lot of talk was about in the nature and being outside and how that helps in multiple means, but acknowledging that students' connection to nature or like just their natural environments and taking that into account. And okay. And then the last one is a place where disability is seen as a strength. So it kind of comes into strength, but recognizing in an intentional way. So disability as a strength. We had smaller adult to child ratios.
And you're thinking enroll, not capacity, right? Adult and building carrying adults to child.
And then different learning styles, taking into consideration and being by needs and interests, children and adults.
And sometimes it's said in a lot of different ways. We talk about universal functional learning in that same way, right? That different learning styles, kids have choices in terms of like we did today and how we're going to demonstrate our thinking. Anything else from there? No.
Okay, one main thing we had was choice, basically choice in learning, like educational, how we show things. Using special interests to encourage learning and participation and engagement. Also choice in space in the classroom, the environment, some, combination of places to be, a standing desk, a desk where you can, move your feet on something, a quiet space, depending on your day, right? To be able to have choice in your space, to be able to change that up if needed, during the day. Moving out of the Stone Age and leveraging tech, right? Technology is moving and it's moving quickly, and we have an opportunity to use technology to help close gaps and take down barriers. But it also gives us an opportunity to teach our kids how to use this technology in a safe, responsible way, because it's not going anywhere. And it goes back to building relationships, educators knowing students and building relationships, because whenever you have that connection between a teacher and a student, they often thrive because they feel seen. And of course fostering that with the children in the classroom as well, peer on peer. And one last thing was the parent involvement and support as well. Parent voice in there.
Are there any key pieces that haven't yet come up in our conversation that we think we want to make note of?
Oh, from
all of this, yeah. That we want to make sure makes the list.
Yes. So when it came to connection, I think the idea of curiosity, we did bring it up in our group because allowing for students to explore their natural, what they want to learn versus what they're ready to learn, is really valuable.
Okay, I'd just like to add on, I know you're summarizing all of the concepts, so you're looking to reduce words, but I just like to be careful with a concept like disability as a strength. I think disability can be seen as a strength in terms of including different perspectives, so involving disabled voices. But I want to be careful not to look at this concept of disability is a superpower, or disability is so inspiring. Because there's a lot of big forces in the disability community who say that type of attitude is actually very harmful.
Yeah.
Disability is disability, especially when we look at the social model of disability, where the environment is what makes a person disabled, not their actual disability. So I just don't want to take away.
Is there a way to word that differently? I don't know who, I can't remember. I told you
It really comes down, it's, they really say it's ability, it's focused on ability. And that's the thing, is it's focused on everybody's ability is value. And that's where it comes down to remove the word as far as disability, and sure, I agree. I just want to, I would like to add one thing, and it came from actually this document that I've used around building trust in diverse teams. And under that document, they actually have 10 criteria in building trust. And because ultimately that's what happens when communications break down and whatever, is that, and I think there were, I'll just roughly, there's 10: confidence, openness, integrity, reciprocity, can't say that, compatibility, goodwill, predictability, well-being, inclusion, accessibility. And I think they're really 10 crucial, and that's for trust. And this is as a document that actually was put up by the UN. And I think those are really crucial criteria, because trust comes down at the end that we're building trusting relationships with our teachers, with parents, and even peers, right? You have to step to the environment. So those are just the comments.
And can we, I know I won't capture them all, yeah, actively while I'm listening, but we'll make sure that if Lisa didn't capture them, we do.
Yeah.
You have them in the notes as well.
I just want to say that but you just said that when I look at every piece, the trust leads into every piece, because I don't think you care if I don't trust you. So there's a lot of all the
in relationships, right? I think this relationships, connection, trust kind of all comes together. But sometimes I like the framing you gave us of the 10 things, because sometimes we use those words and we say we're building relationships, but there's different perceptions of what that means. I think we have a fantastic relationship. You may not feel the same. So there's all of those. What is a relationship actually for two people, for different people? And so that helps to narrow it down a little bit beyond words that we tend to use, but don't necessarily explicitly say what that means.
I just add one thing. I think one of the things that I thought about with a lot of the points were like kind of leading to positive, but I thought about mistakes and making room for mistakes, or I don't know how to put it another way, but in other words, accepting mistakes is a natural part of learning, because that's true. So
It's almost like welcoming in some ways, right? Yeah, so that's how we learn, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of like trust is, it kind of goes back to the trust, but something else that I've been trying to struggle with a little bit as well is having psychological safety. When you say you feel safe, you can make a mistake. You feel safe that you can ask a question and you can ask for an accommodation, or you can tell somebody to stop it because you don't like, and you feel safe to do so. And you don't have this emotional, I can't say anything because so-and-so's gonna get mad at me, or they're just gonna tell me no. So there's that level of I can, because I trust that it will be okay. And that's really because it's that centers around all of that.
It brings it all together, right? And so there's like we talked about humanity and dignity, like it all, which are honestly key themes we've been hearing in lots of spaces. So it is nice to see when things start to come in connection in a space where you're having conversations.
Can also include OCT qualified teachers who are receiving and engaging in ongoing professional learning individually and as teams and as staff. OCT learning, ongoing,
But also SEAC qualified teachers in the classroom who are receiving ongoing learning. Because none of what we've talked about would happen if the teacher is not on board.
And this will really come in, I think it's important to note it absolutely, and we're coming into implementation procedure, right? Once we say this is what we expect to see in every classroom, then we go, how are we gonna make it happen? Well, we need to make sure that OCT qualified teachers have ongoing learning opportunities in teams together and on their own to be able to actually implement what it is we're saying is an ideal classroom for students. That's probably my opinion, asking me what I want for dinner. Yes, sorry.
I just wanted to change up instead of smaller adult to child ratio, but it should say smaller child to adult ratio.
Okay.
Not less.
Yes.
Balance point. And before we go too far, if we can just spell out what OCT means, we're trying to avoid acronyms so that people watching know what that means. And OCT means
Ontario College of Teachers.
thank you.
And I apologize to folks online that will not be able to read the writing. Started off now. I'm just going to go too quickly. That gives us some really great key themes that we can share when we put all of the key themes together. Then we'll triangulate what's rising to the top from that as the foundation. And so we will share back what we heard. That brings a little more clarity to the chicken scratch. But we will bring that back. And then if there are those adjustments, things like, can we just change this wording? Can we alter that here? Can we add this? We really want to make sure that all voices are represented and that collective thinking when we're done. We'll of course have opportunities once we do start a building process to come back and share what that looks like. For now, your thinking is really valued in terms of the initial creation stages. So thank you, and thanks for engaging in some play.
Thank you so much for coming in.
No problem. I'm just gonna collect all our return sparks. Yeah. I can do it.
I just do that every and then we'll run this.
Thank you.
Right. We're just getting settled and we'll move on to our second presentation in this minute.
Yeah, bring it all together. Your name is some additional background. Obviously, no one will see parts, right?
Okay, we are going to move on to item number 11, which is our presentation regarding our SEAC caregiver survey results with Leslie Parsons, a research associate student achievement supporting Chris Conley. I'm sure I don't have the here.
Manager of Research, Strategic Analyst.
Great, thank you very much. And they'll go over our results from our survey, parent caregiver survey.
So, first off, I just want to begin by thanking all the parents and caregivers that participate in the survey. They're always appreciative of their feedback, and they're not going to get a chance to tell me, so you can pass that along. It was very thoughtful and insightful comments. So, we can begin. Who's clicking? Oh, there you go. You're the clicker. Okay. So the survey ran in the spring, which is the time that we ran it previously, and all the grades and municipalities were represented. The overall satisfaction, what's working well and what needs to be improved. And the IPRC meeting review and student information prizes the bulk of the survey, and it was a mixture of quantitative data and qualitative data. We did have about half the number of responses from the previous one. Not sure why. There was competing surveys. The big climate and well-being survey was running sort of overlapping that time, as well as the student census. So it possibly could have been fatigue, too many surveys. But so it was a little disappointing in the numbers, but the quality of comments were spectacular. And click. So the satisfaction with the communication was still pretty good, although it was less than previous year. So that would be, we did it in 2000 and spring of 2023. So back then satisfaction was about 72.5%. This time it's 65. Well, 65.6%. And satisfaction decreases towards the older grades, which is something we saw last year as well. So that could be possibly because communication is taking place between the staff and the student rather than the parent. And the parents were the ones that were answering the survey. So the next slide is focusing on that dissatisfaction in the higher grades. Don't have these are possible factors, but it is something that we were seeing comments from parents of the older grades wanting to connect. So whatever is preventing them from being in that loop of communication is probably something that needs to be looked into deeper, because there was some frustration in the comments about not being able, plus the multitude of, I guess in the older grades, you're having multiple teachers, multiple support people, and so they may have been connecting with some, but not all. And there was a desire to be able to connect on some level with all of the educators and support staff. And this was it's not happening. So the next slide. This is just an outline of our approach and how we or I did the thematic analysis of the comments, which was to assign themes, and some comments are aligned with multiple themes. So you, in the appendixes, you'll see some comments may have appeared more than once because they're addressing multiple themes. I try to use my best judgment. There's no assessment involved in the quality of the comment. It's just what theme do I feel that it is speaking to, and then the comment speaks for itself. There wasn't too much suppression. We did redact if a name was mentioned to identify whether it was in praise or in criticism. It didn't matter. The name was redacted, as that's a privacy issue. And so the next slide, this was a new question that did not appear in the previous one, and it was anticipation of the dissatisfaction at the secondary level. And so this question was only asked of parents who indicated they had a student in grade 9 to 12, asking them specifically what information would be out to them. And it kind of mirrored the same themes from the next open-ended questions, was just that check-in. They want to know, it's too long a time, I guess, between meetings or scheduled meetings. They want more a pulse on how their child was doing, an update. And I know there was a lot of comments that were around, they want to just know, like, they don't want to hear when something's going wrong. Yes, they want to hear it, but they don't only want to hear if there's some issue, positive feedback about achievements and progress is welcome as well. So there was a lot of comments about the IEP accountability, the awareness, the adherence, the implementation seemed to be forefront in a lot of the comments. And there was a new category, and I think it was on there about just the approach, not so much what is being communicated, but how it's being communicated seemed to make a big difference on whether they felt the people were understanding and empathetic, and that would encourage. And there was a desire, for to engage, not just with the parents, but with students as well, to have the involvement at that age group, that they felt students should be equally involved in discussions and communications. So it was interesting to get specifically there. This is a list of what they feel they need. So it was very enlightening. The next slide. These are the themes, and lots is working with. Lot. There's some of the comments were so uplifting, and families were so appreciative of caring of the staff and the type of service and support. And each word, the size of the word is behind it is the frequency. So communication is got the biggest font because it had the most responses in a positive. So those people that were having good communications, the communication was really good. So that's very encouraging. Professional approach is that piece where people were commenting, saying how caring and interested the staff was in their childhood and their child's progress as them as a person. And that was very appreciated. And the student voice is that engaging with the student. They, for them to have the opportunity, if they're able, to provide input on the supports that they are receiving. So now the next is thinkers, and there's a lot of things. So the accountability piece was not really present in the last survey. And what that really was not, it's all around the IEP and the plan and the items in the plan. And were those items, were staff even aware? And that seemed to be the theme. If they're not aware, why aren't they aware? And what are we going to do about it? In implementation, if elements of the plan are not implemented, why aren't they implemented? And what are we going to do about it? And then the adherence was more along the lines of consistency, where things may have been implemented, but they weren't consistently actionable, or they were not from different staff members. There wasn't a consistency. So that was improved communication. Wasn't just about improving the communication between the families and the students, but between staff and staff, because there seemed to be some issues around if there was a cover, the primary educator was away and it was covered, someone was covering, they didn't know anything about the accommodations. And so there was a sense of frustration in that, and people, the parents and caregivers were so invested. I mean, I was so impressed with the feedback, because it wasn't just criticism. It was constructive, and then it was instructive. If this isn't happening, then this is what I suggest you do. So a lot of the comments provided solutions And some of the solutions were about communication. Let's collaborate. They know their child better than anyone. So that need to be brought into provide, consultation with the supports and the accommodations and engaging with them because they seem so very willing in the comments, so very willing to be approached. The other thing that seemed to be about, I did make a theme about being proactive and being consistent because there seemed to be a gap on following. They'd have a conversation and then there'd be nothing. So how do they know that what had they been discussed was followed up on? And then the proactive, like there was comments about not allowing things to escalate or being surprised halfway through the year to find out that something was going on. So there was this encouraging staff to be proactive in reaching out to families before things become too serious or too much overwhelming. And then training. A lot of that suggestions and recommendations were around training that staff needs to be, have more professional learning about the different, different things that special ed, if they need to have accommodations and more training around how to implement things. Having the plan is not good enough if what the plan is outlining is not being implemented or not being implemented well, or the implementation is not meeting the needs. So it was really fantastic. I mean, there was such a frankness and I was really moved by some of the comments because it wasn't just about complaining. It was really about using their voice to promote change. So and then I think it's just one final slide, and it was basically one quote that just stuck with me through the whole thing. And I thought how simple, and yet I don't know how easy that would be. But that seemed to be the path that the comments were laying out. And please they meet them more, they're willing to meet the staff more than halfway, not just for their own child. The advocacy voice for all students was so strong. So that's it. And I don't know if you have any questions. I know there was a lot of material to go through and we're available, to follow up.
Allison? I was just wondering, Leslie, with the bar graphs and we laid out for us what was working well and what isn't working well, whether you spotted patterns at particular grade levels.
There was, and that was part of the appendix. When I started to see things, I deliberately in the appendix I listed out because I was curious to see because I had seen it before. Were certain themes there was more, applicable to certain grades, not, in stark contrast, like the kindergarten, and you can appreciate families coming in and maybe their first child, and so everything is new. And so, their expectations around communication are much higher than if you're, say, your students in grade 8 and they've had, dealings with staff and services and the plan. They're more informed by then after years. Right. So I did that deliberately because I wanted to see what would emerge. And there was a few things, but there was a consistency, that across all grades. In this 11 and 12, there was a lot of focus on preparing for life after school. So there was the co-op and the placement and wanting more about life skill learnings. Then there you would not see that, for grade 1s. But so I did that hoping to see whether or not there would be trends emerging within those grade levels. But overall, I think they were all pretty consistent in what they were desiring and what they were expecting.
So, go ahead, Shanti. So I have a few questions. At the beginning, you talked about how the number of respondents was down compared to last year. Was that number down across all grades, or was it higher in certain grades and then lower in other grades?
I think it was just consistently, I don't probably have it in here. The total amount was it wasn't last year, it would have been the year before. They didn't run it every year. So 2003 was 1,118. This time it was 530. I don't recall it. I mean, I think the responses were pretty balanced from the last one as well. Same as the municipalities. It was just less people. Let me have a look. In fact, the graph looked very similar. Just yeah, there we go. Let's have a look. Results. For the satisfaction, so the grade 11 and 12, very satisfied, 32.3%, somewhat satisfied, 33.5%, dissatisfied, 17.7%, 16.5% very dissatisfied.
I just meant about like the total number of respondents. Oh, so you're saying like the total number of respondents was trending downwards. So I'm curious. My thinking is it just general fatigue from too many surveys at one time, or is it newer parents coming into the system are saying, okay, I'm going to give my input, and parents who have been involved for a while are now saying, clearly the board isn't listening to my input, so therefore I'm not going to fill out these surveys anymore.
We'll never know for sure. It's just a guess. I think it's a combination of all things. I think it was a very busy survey spring, unusually like that. We don't usually run the climate survey that late in the year. Unfortunately, we had to do it this year. So it could be that fatigue. And just one more, I love surveys. They don't do the best hobby when I'm sitting waiting, for an appointment or something, but some people do not like, so we appreciate that. It's possible that if people answered the survey 2 years ago, saw it again, but nothing's changed, I have nothing to add, they may not have. We'll never know the motives. I don't know how widely it was communicated. I believe it would have been emailed and possibly posted on the website.
I feel like if we had those numbers, it would maybe clarify that position, or give the board some valuable feedback about how their respondents are generally feeling about their voice being heard, though.
When we think about the responses, particularly in non-response, there's 4 areas that we tend to think about. So one is in terms of awareness. So did we do a good enough job communicating, letting people know that the survey was out there and that we wanted them to engage? So that's a point that we can reflect on, and perhaps do some follow-up, or even listen as you're in your communities. And that would be a great follow-up question when you're meeting with parents. Did you know? Did you participate? And what are you hearing when you're in the communities? The other is the access. So does the online survey itself pose an obstacle to some of the families that we want to hear from? We do a lot of, are there any families that wouldn't be engaged through email contact? So that's a consideration. Availability is the timing of it. So I think there was probably some challenges with the timing. We got out ahead of the school climate survey, but then it did pick up at the tail end of it. You do tend to get the most participation on the first few days, and then immediately after reminders. And then the last one that we tend to think about is trust. So are people trusting us with their comments? And that comes back to the relationship they have with the organization. Do they feel like if they share their information, will it be acted upon? Can they see it being acted upon? So that ties back into communication in highlighting in communication of how decisions that are being made or opportunities that are presented tie back into what was heard. So that whole conversation we have with the senior team and at the planning table around we heard and now we're doing is an important part.
And that was actually a follow-up question, is what are we actually doing with this data now?
And it was offered in other languages, but there was no one who requested that. There was translations available, hoping that if language was a barrier, that would gain access to it. We had no one ask for it.
It's okay if I ask the rest of my questions. I can wait and take turns if other people want to jump in, but
Yeah, I've got two questions actually about the response rate. The one, I know families who had multiple children receiving special education, they were asked to fill out separate survey for each child. So when you say 530, is that 530 children, or do you have a way of knowing whether they're families?
It would be 530 respondents. So 530 people.
530 responses. It's 530 completed surveys.
Okay.
So if there's a family with multiple children, then the children would presumably be represented in the responses, but they would have been completed.
Right, so it's presumably less than 530 families. That
yeah.
And then the other one, you go, and then I'll try and remember myself.
So the one thing I would like to address kind of touches on something we're going to talk about later and is kind of its own separate thing. Even though it included kindergarten on here, because I know some students in kindergarten do have IPRCs, there seems to be, there is this optics in this board right now of a practice of discouraging families from seeking an IPRC in kindergarten. Therefore, if students with diagnoses are in kindergarten without an IPRC, they are then being excluded from this survey. So then we really don't have a good idea of how well, when we look at regular classes, are the most inclusive learning place for all of these children, when we're excluding this data of children who are being forced into regular classes because there isn't an alternative kindergarten placement. We're actually not collecting any data from those families to say, do you feel like this is inclusive of your child? Is your child having a good experience with their diagnosis unsupported in a regular classroom, or with very limited supports in a regular kindergarten classroom? I'm just putting that out there.
Okay. But, and that kind of led to one of the questions I asked is that, even though they may not have and even an IEP in that, is that they still may have participated, especially at the very beginning, a meeting, basically a transition meeting coming from. So I wanted to know how, one was the question that you were saying to reflect on is, how was it distributed and to how many people did you, and to how many people was it distributed to? Was it because it did say that to all basically identified in those that will participate. So that also gives an idea to compare, how many could have responded to how many have responded. And then, really what was the difference between this year and 2 years ago? Because I know 2 years ago, we made really, really strong efforts to have basically the access to technology during teacher, report and teacher interviews sort of, right? Or by the placements, right? Which were due then. So that kind of background information also would help here and also help compare from one to the other.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
So I can tell you, Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So the survey was shared with 13,525. That's how many recipients received the survey. It was launched on May 12th through email and social media. So an email went out May 12th. We did push a reminder email at the end of May. And again, a third email on June 5th. In that June 5th email, we extended the date of the survey from June 6th, we made additional week to June 6th, or June 13th, I'm sorry.
No, this is perfect. Everybody questions. So is it that the majority or the means to which people would do the surveys is through email? Is that fact? Like is that
Well, we generate a link to the survey tool, and then the link can be embedded into an email or into a web page. So or a social media posted. They just embed the link and the link takes them directly to the survey.
I did remember that second question. It was about, do you have any information about people who may have clicked the link and started the survey, but not necessarily?
We do track that, but I don't report that because that would be considered in part like incomplete.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always taken the view that once someone clicks the submit button, it's almost like their consent to participate. So if they started it and then decided for whatever reason they didn't want to continue, we don't count that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that's feedback to us, like if there was some point that people reach and then they stop there for some reason, or
it's hard to know what the motive is because sometimes they could have started it and the phone rang. So
And then forgot.
they forgot. Or it's like, oh, this is longer than I expected, and I'm not doing this on my phone. I'm going to wait till I get home. Like we will never know the motive.
It's usually a combination. You can imagine it. There's probably a case where that's applicable, where somebody started it too long. Somebody just wants to go in and see what the questions are, and maybe they're not even interested in participating in it, but they saw the social media and say, "What's this about?"
It might be useful, sorry to, it might be useful information just to have the number though, because like how many respondents do we have? Was it 400 or something?
530.
Okay, 500. So if 500 people clicked on it and then never finished it, that might be useful information that something's wrong with the survey. Like whatever it is, maybe it's too long. Maybe we need to dig into that a little bit more. If 1,000 people clicked on it and never finished it, that would also be useful information. If it was 2 people, then it's like, okay, well, maybe we can disregard that. But if the number is very high, like, I think it can give us some ideas that there's something about the survey that needs to be examined.
Yeah, we can get that number.
Allison? I was just playing 2 questions. The first one is, was there an option to save their responses and then resume the survey at another time? So they had to complete it all on. The second thing I was going to say was sort of a question / comment. I think it's incumbent upon us to think about what accountability should look like. So it seemed that parents wanted accountability when accommodations weren't being fully implemented, accommodations that were decided upon in an IEP, for example. So I don't know, and we can't necessarily know what parents thought the accountability process might look like. But I think it's important for us to understand if a parent says to a teacher, I don't feel that you're implementing the accommodations we agreed upon, and the teacher either says, I'll do better, or says that they have been and the parent disagrees, where does the parent go? And is that information communicated to the parent? Or is the school's CERT person, for example, holding the classroom teacher accountable? So maybe this is a discussion that's already been had, but I don't think I've been part of the discussion about what accountability would look like. And I don't know, I quickly skimmed the comments. I don't know whether parents specifically said
I wish I could go to the principal and I'm not happy, or I think we should understand how to put that in place.
It struck me, and it's just my judgment assigning the themes, but when I kept seeing that, I've never made that as a theme previous to the SEAC, but it started to become evident to me that that's what, I mean, they may not have used the word accountable, but to me, that's what it felt like. They were not feeling that there was not the follow-up, or things weren't happening, why not? And so there was more seeking and answers, and accountability was my word, because I felt that's what was describing what I was hearing from the comments.
Right.
And that's why those comments, I put them under that theme so you can read through and see whether or not you feel the same. But that's, to me, it wasn't just about the amount of communication, like volume wise. It was what was being shared was not necessarily what they were needing and expecting.
Lauren's gonna add to that as well. Theme that's evolving as we've been sitting here this evening, is really the need for clarity on process for families on how to access the supports for their child. My understanding is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the results of SEAC survey, the intent would be for us to collaborate together to create a plan based on the data that we've collected today. So certainly happy to add that to a future agenda as an opportunity for us to bring that clarity that I think we've been discussing.
Chair,
yeah. So I'll just a couple of things. So on, I believe the last time, Connor, did we not bring the results of the parent survey to the administrators group day and said, here's what we heard. What are you going to do about it? And so we've got, and the one thing that I'm sort of seeing, like Leslie, with the word map, things we did well, communication, things we need to do better, communication. Like, to me, that speaks to consistency of application and execution across the entire platform. It's great. We've got these fantastic ideas, and some people have really figured it out, and other people have not. And we need that level of consistency. So we set that expectation and the accountability that comes with it to say, guys, we need to do better. I know everybody's doing has good intention, assume good intent, but here's what the expectations are, because this is what we're hearing from the parents, is that we're not meeting that expectation. We're not actually doing that. That's
when it works, it's great.
When it doesn't,
it's the frustration.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's
potentially disengagement. Sharing feedback.
And some of it worked great. And there was a theme, like praise.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when it's working, it is fantastic.
And
you're not shy about tooting the horn and saying my teacher, my EA is the best. I mean, there was so many comments like that.
Yeah.
But that's not everyone's experience.
And I've had both gamuts. I was saying that earlier. I had both gamuts with my son's school career, where I've had the best experience ever, and then went, oh my Lord, this is not working. So it is inconsistent. So even with one kid, my kid, all the way through, different people will have different experience, and that's I think what I'm seeing from some of those comments, because it's a lot of the same things were great and a lot of the same things were bad. So, and it's just based on that experience, and what do we do to make sure that it's good for everybody? But that's, for me, is how we get there.
Kelly, just quickly, just what I've been connecting to some of the comments in the feedback is just kind of what you said before, is the expectations and the clarity of expectations. What is the expectation, the clarity of that, and also choices. So between parents and students, so clarity in what choices do I have or don't have, and what expectations should I have. So sometimes it's assuming what we think parents know or should know, or maybe even questioning what is it that they might not know. So I think those pieces tie into the expectations.
it's interesting because I remember there is and I'm trying to remember the number of regulation, and I brought this up where it was talking about parent engagement, and it actually gives a response time and everything else. And I've lost it, but
160.
yeah, it might be 160. I lost it, and the fact that our board doesn't, although we have it, but we have in that regulation, it actually talks about responding within, at least responding, saying that I've received your communication within 48 hours or 48 business hours, right? And so, and our parent, and we talked about that, it needs to be reviewed, the policy needs to be reviewed to reflect once, I believe it, you're right, I think it's 160. But it's interesting because the previous government actually had which has been archived because it was created by the previous government. So I'm talking previous board, right, government, and it was a parent engagement policy, and it outlined exactly what teachers were responsible, parents were responsible, and so forth, and that was archived and no longer used and came out with 160. But that was the first time there was an actual standard on what the expectations were on communication. And so that's where I'm looking at from a board perspective of what, looking at our communication standard, what is reasonably expected where collaboration can be done and to ensure that is happening, right? Because as Tara said, when it's done well, that's great. But when it's not, and you're right, disengagement is when we get calls at the trust level, it's gone to disengagement, and I guarantee many of those parents did not fill out that form because they're not, at that point in time, they're telling us because they've been disengaged. They can't get their point across. They're not being heard. They're not. So that's another.
So I have a suggestion. I wish that the survey had a submit at any point button with a double check button that says you've pressed the submit button. There's 4 more questions left. Do you really want to submit? And they press the submit there. Because we talked about parents' time, their engagement, but then we would be able to capture some of those questions that happened in the beginning.
The survey tool we have does have the ability to save the responses. So if they were to start it and then wanted to save it and go back to it, the only thing with that is it does require them to provide an email address, which could be, we would not use it for anything. We wouldn't know anything about it, but it does get the impression that it may not necessarily be anonymous. It would be anonymous, but if you're asked to be giving your email, and it's only so that the email gets linked to that particular submission, so then they can return to it. They will the tool emails them back a link that says, here's your own private link to access it. So I have used it, could use it. That's the only sort of drawback, is it does give an impression that it may not be as anonymous as it truly is.
Even in this circumstance, when we have it anonymous, if there's something that's alarming that comes through, there's honestly no way for us to figure out who shared that so that we could respond. But even though that's the case, understandably, in the world that we live in, people still have this feeling that you say it's anonymous, but it's me, and so to add. We try to shy away from asking any identifying, even in the structure of it. But if that was something that you wanted to explore, we could certainly do that in the future. It would just need a lot of extra, really strong communication for people to understand that it's being used as a convenience for them in completing it, and not as a surveillance tool on our side in the submission side.
The reason why I said submitted at any point rather than save is because I could see many parents coming to the first question where it says comments, putting down all their comments and then wanting to exit. So
yeah.
right? Which wouldn't invalidate their information.
No.
My other question is, these numbers, are these numbers real? Did you say 13,000 and you said 500?
Yeah.
Which is less than 2.5%? That is, so at what point do we not have enough responses to validate the information that we?
So that's a quantitative question to a qualitative process. So the question is, how many bad experiences have to be shared for us to feel like there's enough to do something about it? And that's, yeah. And so that's not a question that we can apply. That's something that you'll have to consider. Is this, because the question is, how representative is this across the system? Totally fair question, but that requires a completely different approach to approaching people and asking them. So what we would do is we would take the feedback now, develop another survey and say, have you experienced, some people have experienced this, have you? And then hope that in the next survey, we can do even better in participation than we did on the first survey. And if we have a community that's entirely disengaged, that's going to be a hard sell.
I know Shauna had another good point. You're okay? Okay, and then I think what we maybe need to do from this point on is just to maybe make an agenda item, maybe in November, to discuss kind of next steps, what we'd like to see kind of happen from this, because I think that's kind of where this conversation would need to lead, right? Especially when you're looking at the high school comments, right? So,
so I was just gonna add to that and say I would like to have a further discussion about what to do with this data, but the one thing that really stood out was the communication piece. I heard that in the past this has been taken to administrators, but I do feel like something needs to happen at the board level. Something that I feel like might be helpful to look into is other school boards actually send out a consultation letter at the beginning of the school year for the IEP process, asking for parent input into the IEP, whereas in the school board, an IEP is written without any parent input and then sent home and said, well, do you have any comments? And by that point, it's mid to end of October that parents are receiving this. When it actually gets implemented, it's probably going to be January and half the year is gone. So that might be a way for parents to have more of a voice and to bring up their concerns proactively, and for CERTs and homeroom teachers to actually know what parents are expecting and be able to work more collaboratively with them.
Yes. Sorry, Park.
Again, if you want to call, we can call it that one.
I just
want to say from there. So just in response, part of our process is that being prior consultation with families, and it's expected in the fact that that should be going out and there should be consultation. That is also meeting with families' best ability to do that. So that means that there needs to be a phone conversation. With that phone conversation, if it means that we can write something in, create a promise or did something else, but again, that consultation prior to is an expectation that we do have as well.
Okay, but it's not.
all right. Okay, so we're going to, that's going to become an agenda item for November, and then we can sort of have a discussion about where we move forward from there, because I think there are discussions to be had based upon the results, and I don't think that's necessarily a statistical response, but a next step response. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Thank you. We're going to move on to business arising from the minutes. The first two items were actually already addressed under the this presentation right now, as well as the gifted, the special education gifted items were in order to the gifted item was already talked about in the staff report. So the other was the draft letter to the Minister of Education, and I thought about it several times and then totally forgot about it this week. So I will have that sent around for the next meeting for everybody to review with all the comments. The other is association and committee reports. Are there any association or committee reports? Yeah, Allison?
I'll make it quick, because some of these I can say again in October, but, there will be on October 26th, there will be an accessible trick or treating event for, children whose exceptionalities make it difficult to go door to door. So you can, come and see Easter Seals are putting that on at Pickering Town Center. And I'd be happy to give you information if you are interested in registering. You do need to register. And the second thing, speaking of surveys, is that Easter Seals itself has recently put out a survey on people's experiences on special education across the province. So I imagine that information will be available on their website. It'll be public information, I imagine, but I just wanted to let you know that that's going on as well.
If you want to send those, the links to that stuff, Lisa, that she can circulate it to the groups and they can share it out to associations.
Will do.
Okay.
All right, yeah, just know, because I noticed people leaving and I don't want to lose quorum before
Yes.
we approve this letter, so.
Yes.
Before anybody else wants to speak.
Yes, we're going to the, communication. Yeah, sorry. There's a letter from the Association for Bright Children naming a new alternate. My previous alternate has stepped down at the end of the school year, so the letter was sent through to Lisa to remove Nancy Mann as the alternate and to nominate Jordan Kyriakides, who's my older daughter, as the alternate on SEAC for the Association for Bright Children. She's a Canadian citizen over the age of 18, eligible to vote for trustees, and is not an employee of the board. But we would need a motion for SEAC to request the board approve the nomination.
Yeah, for the board to approve the alternate for.
Yeah, for the alternate, the nomination for the alternate. If somebody wants to put forward a nomination for that.
It should be that last thing.
See, it's
Waiting.
Tara, seconders, Allison, all in favor? Excellent, thank you.
And just on that note, because we have board meeting on the 15th, if we could get that so that it goes quickly so that you do have approval before the next meeting.
Yes, to Jillian.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. That was the correspondence. Was there any other, circle back, any other association reports? Nope. Okay, and community concerns?
So out of respect for the importance of the concern, and some having to leave, do you want me to address them this evening or hold them until we're all in space at 3?
Mm-hmm.
Happy to address them.
I think we should maybe address them. They'll go in the minutes and then we can discuss them if necessary at the next meeting. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Can we make them an agenda item at the next meeting though, so that it's not saved until the end?
Business arising.
We can do it in the business arising from the minutes. Yeah.
Okay. So the first community concern that came forward was it says there was a way, looking for a way to reassure parents that they don't feel the need to go through the appeal process to know that their child will have support at school, especially around health and safety concern. Hearing from parents seeking a small class placement for health and safety reasons, when some communication around VA scheduling could prevent that escalation, as they don't necessarily want the placement, just the support. So in terms of in response, we talked a lot tonight about the importance of communication and that open communication between home and school being an essential part of that process. And in that process, being able to bring school and family together to the table to talk about and creation of that plan, that support plan for students. We said we need that. We talked about that plan that worked and it was clear. That needs to be an important part of the process to make sure parents feel that reassurance. So when students have concerns around health and safety, we often find that those can be addressed by a really specific sitting down together. What's the concern? And putting a particular support in place to address that individual concern. But a structure that would support that is a care conference. So should a parent be in a position where they're feeling like they're not sure what the next step is or that the appropriate supports are not in place, asking to have a care conference where we bring to the table school staff, administration, community partners, advocates, could also inclusive student services, team members that are supporting the student. So is a process that is a way to create that plan collaboratively together. So that's important. It's important to know that when we talk about supports, they come in a variety of forms. So we think about that EA as the main support, but the reality is the supports come through appropriate programming. The supports come through CERTs and classroom teachers and ECEs. It comes from lunchroom supervisors who are there to assist. So really, what it needs to be is a comprehensive plan to look at all aspects of the concern of the parent and work collaboratively to create that. You've heard it loud and clear tonight many times, not only in the survey, but in conversation at the table, that the regular check-in and knowing, being reassured that the goals that we put into that plan are being addressed is also a really important part of that process. So the opportunity to connect back to the school every 6 weeks, let's say, or maybe it's every week as we begin to put the plan in place and reassure parents that these are the things that we're seeing and we're seeing progress. That could be having gone through the appeal process. This conversation about just making sure that really clear communication around what those supports are is often what parents are looking for. So, but I'm hearing you say, if that process is not happening or parents are feeling that they can't get to that process, first point of contact would obviously be your school principal. And then you can always reach out to the instructional facilitator that's supporting your student as well. And certainly if you're not sure who that is, we can share that with you. But one of the reasons that I asked the system to join us this evening is that they are also a point of contact that parents can reach out to, who can help facilitate the conversation. And so Joe Wrigley supports Ajax Pickering schools, and Nancy is Whitby and the North, and Connor is continuing to support Oshawa. So families can certainly connect their system needs as well. And again, I bring us back to the conversation around that clarity of process. So I'm hearing that parents aren't actually sure what that process is. So if I don't necessarily need to go to appeal, but I do need to be clear on what that process could look like. So that's something that we could look at as a next step out of the SEAC survey.
I think part of the issue though, Warren, is that it's not being addressed at the school level,
right?
And then it's escalating. And then by the time it's escalated through a certain number of levels of this, where things just aren't being communicated, you have very upset, angry parents who don't have any trust in the system anymore. And then you have to contend with the fact that they aren't going to take people at their word and they say, well, don't worry, we'll figure it out. So for things like, I agree with you, it doesn't always have to be an EA, but if you have a child who's not toileted and they're wearing diapers to school, they need to know that an EA is going to be able to support their child with toileting and cleaning them if they need it. That's inclusion. We want that child in a regular class. And if what they're being told by schools is, we can't guarantee any control, I don't understand how parents are supposed to trust that their child is safe at school. So we need to clarify the position on that. If you have a child who elopes, which is running out of the school or running away from staff, how are we making sure they're safe in a classroom that only has one teacher? How are we making sure they're safe in a kindergarten class with 30 kids and 2 adults that might have multiple children that they're watching? How is the parent feeling safe trusting that? Or even if they did feel safe in kindergarten and now they're going to grade 1 with only 1 staff, how are they feeling safe when they're told there's no alarms on the doors? We can't guarantee your child's safety, there's no EA. Or a child who needs support during transitions, right? Let's talk about children with sensory needs who are autistic, who can't be in loud, busy environments. That's an environmental accommodation that we need to provide, right? So how are we supporting them when they're in kindergarten. Maybe there's time for the ECE to pull them out during a busy transition, but depending on the needs in the room, there isn't necessarily, right? So, I mean, maybe the parents feel like it's okay in kindergarten, but then they get to grade 1 and they're being told, we can't guarantee any EA time for transitions for your child. If they're overwhelmed, too bad. If they start banging their head against the wall because they're overwhelmed, we can't do anything about that. That's not inclusion.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
And I hear you. And I think in experience, having gone through the creation of that plan, you raise those individual concerns. And as a team, there needs to be an action to that concern so that parents leave that meeting at that moment with reassurance that if there is an issue around toileting, this is the response to that. And so I think if the conversation is open between families and school staff around what will the response be, you can get to that point. And the regular check-in is that continued building of trust or reassurance that you're addressing that. And as I said, if parents are feeling that those strategies are not working, we do have additional supports that we can bring to conversation.
I think that like we need to like action on that. Like there needs to be actual messaging that staff are saying, because right now, like what I'm telling you is what multiple people, like many people have told me is their experience word for word. We can't guarantee any EA support time. So that sounds like it's being heard somewhere and filtered down. And we need to have, as you said, like with conditions around health and safety, human rights, dignity, things like that, we need to have some sort of a guarantee for families. Like, yeah, maybe you can't have a one-to-one PA sitting beside your child helping them with their work all day, but when it comes to their health and safety, we are going to make sure that your child is looked after. There needs to be some kind of wording that can be given to families around that, right? And we need to also make sure that staff understand what reasonable accommodations are, right? Because I'm also hearing, for example, children with physical disabilities, right, get addressed by themselves, and staff are saying, oh, don't worry though, I've accommodated them, I've given them extra time. I start them 30 minutes before recess and I leave them with their clothes and they have 30 minutes to get dressed. Is that respecting their dignity? Is making them ask for help every single time respecting their dignity? Or is that actually like really degrading? And how would we feel as adults if you had to ask another adult for help every single time in front of all of your peers? Please help me put on my mittens, I can't do it myself. Every time they fall off at recess, please help me put on my mittens, I can't do it myself. Please help me zip up my jacket. Right? But then you have staff who feel like, well, I'm accommodating, I'm giving them extra time. But some people, I think like the issue is when we look at it is like integration is this like norm that everybody can achieve if they just try hard enough. And sometimes we want to dance around this concept of disability, and that's what we touched on earlier, right? Where it's like, oh, disability is ability, or disability is a strength. And it's like, sure, there are strengths in disability, and from hearing all of those different voices, but disability is also sometimes just disability, right? And we need to respect that and accommodate that, because really it's the environment that's making people disabled. It's not whatever condition that they have. And that's a concern.
I'm just going to throw something in here. The really important thing is, I mean, anybody sitting around this table has heard a lot of different issues and stories and concerns over the years, and many of us have stepped in and attended meetings and helped and tried to, build bridges and things like that. And we often can when that comes up. I know I sit for one association. I've sat in meetings for pretty much any association sitting around, the kids who represent any association sitting around this table. I think the real important part is we're hearing these things, and that is very legitimate and important. But we also now, on the other side, as an advisory committee, need to come up with suggestions and ideas on how to make that better. Because it's not just about us, say, bringing the concerns, but also having that constructive side to say, let's, here are some things that maybe could be solutions, right? So if we start breaking this down into topics that become individual, because we can't address every issue kind of in one meeting, right? So if we take one, for example, on, how do we address what reasonable accommodation looks like, bringing, having that as an agenda item where we're bringing forward ideas on how the board could actually do that. Because I think that's really the role around this table, right? Is to try and provide ideas from a practical sense as parents or caregivers or associations in order to make those things different. So I think maybe what we need to do is come up with a list of sort of points that we want to start making agenda items to be discussed and addressed, right? Because otherwise it's really kind of just a circle of conversation that, because each one of these is an individual story. And as Tara said, we'll have years where I know my daughter, older daughter's grade 4 year, she had just a phenomenal teacher who didn't realize she had alternate identifications outside of giftedness, but saw a need and accommodated it. And I cried at the end of the year because it was such a good year. But we've also had the alternate experience. And I think that's true across the board. So I think what we need to start doing is taking chunks and saying, okay, let's talk about solutions. Alison?
I love that idea. And I think that those concerns that arise from each of us should have more of a driving force in terms of what the agenda consists of, because it always gets squeezed in at the end when we're all tired and we're over time, and we never get an opportunity to fully discuss and problem solve and look for a resolution. So I really like the idea of taking some of the things, for example, that were raised this evening and putting them early on in the agenda so that they get discussed in a really wholesome way.
Right. So, and that is something we can absolutely do. But I do think if we have sort of reoccurring themes, and those become conversations, right? Sometimes there's a bit of a one-off on a community concern, and sometimes each community concern can be like, I've had different situations where I've had conversations directly with somebody in ISS about an issue, and it's been resolved without having to sort of become a community concern. We've just been able to resolve it. So
I was just saying, we just got the survey, and there are definitely themes that you're talking about that fit. And so one of the things is taking the survey, breaking the themes that we want to talk about, and then addressing the community concerns with actions.
Yes.
And I think that's because everything that you've spoken about, I can point to on the survey, right? As far as that. So I think that, I agree, it should be further up as far as we're going to work on this action plan from the survey based on here are the themes that we've come up and they're definitely focused here. This is what we wanted. And here are the areas that we want to address from the community.
Yeah. Okay.
Find right words because I'm retired at this point, but I agree. I am fine with making suggestions, but we've made suggestions. What Sienna has shared and what others have shared around this table is not a new concern. It's one that I feel is, in the last year or so, has become more so. And so the policies are in place. We heard the one talking, like we're hearing the talk and the policies that are in place, but we're talking about the implementation. We can't give suggestions on making superintendents make their administrators accountable for ensuring their staff is professionally developed to be able to do what we're talking about. So we can give all the suggestions in the world, but if they're not going to implement the policies that they've already have in place, and policies don't come without action items. So you don't put a policy and just leave it out there. There's got to be, here's how we implement that policy. So those steps are in place already. And we're hearing about it every time we come. I agree with Allison that this should be at the top of our agenda because that really is our work. Our work is to be the voice of the community in a lot of ways. So I'm not 100% for, we need to make action plans for the board to do. The board knows what to do. They need to do it. And they need to hold their administrators, the board needs to hold the managers, superintendents, the directors, everybody accountable for making it happen at the level. My kids have already gone through the system and the stories I'm hearing are the exact same stories. The curriculum has changed. The environment has changed since post-COVID. Technology is more and better and more accessible. I don't get it. I'm with Sienna on this. I don't get it. The concerns are there, and I don't think it's our responsibility to do that work. We can give suggestions, but to say, here's what you need to do to solve this, I'm not in on that. Because they know already. We've seen, heard all the policies.
I just want to mention that I know our administrators come to work with the intent of doing best by our students. I know that, and I've seen it firsthand every day. I know that sometimes that there are complex situations with students that they don't necessarily have the capacity to deal with on their own. And then when we talk about bringing system leads and clinicians and ISS facilitators to the table, it's because we work collaboratively to find a solution to some very complex cases that are becoming more and more complex all the time. And so I think the opportunity to have this table as an opportunity to collaborate, because you're right, it's not going to get solved alone. But I do know the intent is to do best by our students. And I think this is an essential part of being able to do that. I hear your frustration, but you bring a voice that we need to hear in order to continue to make change and to move forward. So I think that opportunity is an essential part of this table.
But I do agree with Charlene that certain things, it's like we need to act on it and become pocketted, right? So like I heard Connor's point about like, well, it is an expectation that parents are consulted before IEPs are made, but like it's not actually happening. So where does the accountability piece happen? So in some school boards, it's by sending home a form that then gets filed with the IEP and the OSR, so that it's very clear if the parent says my voice hasn't been heard, let's have a case conference and pull this out. Look, I wrote on this form that I wanted this included. You're not including it in the IEP. Why not? Then there's accountability. So if we can't get accountability and compliance just by asking people to do the right thing, then another step, unfortunately, has to be taken to make sure that the accountability is there. And I hear Charmaine that, like, I mean, you can ask us to brainstorm suggestions. I would say that phone call needs to be recorded in the IEP under the notes section or the family contact section. It's not happening. So then whose job is it to check all of the schools and see that this is happening? So we need to have like a plan, an action plan in place to actually follow up on these things to make sure it's happening. I know everybody in the school works hard. I know everybody here loves kids. I know everybody is trying their best. I know it's a really opt-out system right now between just funding and public opinion and everything. But we still, like, we're here for these kids. We have to find a way to serve them and to set them up for success in life. So we need to, if it's not working the way it is now, we need to be open to making some changes.
No, either I saw both your hands at the same time. So
I would rather see what you're saying because my answer.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of a person that has sat on this table for 23 years, first as a parent, and then coming, you know, as a trustee, and I've seen from all of this, from parents on SEAC, being chair of SEAC for 5 years, doing presentations to the board, Okay, and I learned each step of the way, and then becoming a trustee, the different perspectives. And what I can honestly say, you know, Lord, I agree with you. We have many teachers and our administrators, our custodians, everybody that want the best interest of our students. But I also agree that for 23 years, some of these issues are still the ones. One of the biggest thing comes down to what I have seen, and this is my perspective, is from a perspective that the humanity has definitely been lost over the years. And that caring and the other thing, which and trust, particularly gets lost, and then it gets combative, and then how to have constructive caring conversations centered around the child in an emotional situation is extremely difficult. It's not a skill that every administrator is their strong suit. That's all I'll say, or a teacher's strong suit. Because, you know, I can share hair-raising comments on my journey and two different disabilities, two different pathways, starting at the same school, going different directions. One was successful, still, successful, and the other one wasn't successful. The system didn't graduate at all, didn't even get a certificate. So, and the result and the stresses out there between, not only within our board, but also in society with our agencies, our even volunteer associations here, the time and the value of what we provide, again, is not necessarily do parents have the ability to access because they're just too busy in the stresses. What I'm trying to say that from a perspective is that here we can make suggestions, and you're right, from a board. When we talk about the board of trustees look at policy. We cannot impact operational stuff. We can bring to attention, but that is for staff to work through and work down. The only thing that we can do is advise and bring consultant. And I don't know how many times I've advised parents on how to have a constructive, unemotional conversation with the individuals involved. And not only, and when I talk about it, not only verbally, but writing notes that aren't confrontational or demanding. Mm-hmm. And that's the area that I find that it's really, because when I've had success, it's because we've had a collaborative, trusting conversation. And even after I'm having an IPRC meeting or around the IP, I'm going, this is what I heard. Can you verify that this is what, is going to happen? Because it's not confrontational. But if I say, you said you did this is what you're going to break, then automatically, because it's in writing, it gets the context to being confrontational. Mm-hmm. So if we were to help our parents as a group as well, is I'm looking as far as having a constructive conversation at our administrators to dial down this dialogue, because everyone around the table really does want to support our kids. And that's all I have to say. Sorry.
Well, yeah, so of course emotions are high, but I think I'm just gonna follow up with Donna in terms of the pieces that I heard. I listened to, the humanity and about our collaborative approaches. For me, because we all have in our families, in our who we are, we all show up and we all have stories. Exactly as especially in my role as trustee, we do a lot of advocacy, and sometimes we can only just be a listening ear, right? But in terms of impact, I think that we all have influence. I think that how we lead is an influence, and that can make changes. And I will say, I do believe that the changes there are changes happening. So sometimes we don't hear about them
in this context because we are bringing things forward and we're discussing, which is relevant. But there are changes and there are things that are happening even from school to school level because different staff have different approaches and how they collaborate. What I think I would like to see is that piece of collaboration. How are we looking at what is working well, and then how do we make that something that can be shared across the system? Because when there are things doing well, sometimes they're not validated. So then maybe it's working here and it's only happening over here. So making a system to encourage or to validate those actions that are supporting those pieces that are making improvements and making that clear. Also, I think that when we look at when it comes to the communication, and making sure that every part of the chain and people know that they're valuable and that their feedback is valid. A lot of the times I get the perspective that parents don't have enough information to also be engaged in what they know that they can do. So there's an assumption of what's happening. And a lot of that becomes, well, I don't feel like I'm being taken care of, so I just step out. But a lot of times, sometimes parents are not maybe making steps that they could have done had they had the knowledge or the information. So maybe even asking good questions or asking the right questions or asking any type of question, but not knowing what to do next is also a part of the gap. So I think what I hear sometimes is a lot of blame this side, that side, but it's for all of us to just continue to ask good questions, to be more curious and inquire, because it allows for it to get to the root of things instead of kind of we're just focusing on this side of it or that side of it, but it's always a collaboration. There's always pieces that Donna might know something that I might not know. So we constantly, that's how we've seen our success and how we work together. It's how we share with each other. That is very important. I find that parents sometimes feel disempowered because they don't know what to do. So again, I just would say that, the piece of making sure that the collaboration is shared and how that looks like as a structure is very important to that supporting process. Every person is valuable on that chain. That's all my.
Thank you, everybody. I know it's very emotional and nobody here is wrong. Right? I know what you're saying, Carmine. I've been sitting around this table for a long time and I've tried very much to try to run meetings that are really constructive because I don't want to, I just, when we become an adversary or it almost become like just a complaints committee, it doesn't really bring anything forward. And I think that's where my concern is, right? The SEAC regulation sort of has us, we're in an advisory role where we're coming in and saying, these are concerns. And even if we raise the concerns every time, this is still a concern. This is still we got to keep repeating it because I think it's easy to slip away. I think maybe one of the things we need to do as a SEAC is take a look at what is in our agenda, the types of things that we have that are taking time, and then try to find a way to make it more of what we're looking for. Because there are things from the board side coming to SEAC where they're looking for a consultation on changes, like tonight, right? So we need to have that. We've had a survey go out. We needed to go over the results of that, and that breeds a whole bunch of other conversation. And there's a finite amount of time that we've lost a number of our members have had to go. And unfortunately, all the voting stuff really has passed. So we're okay with that. But we have to sort of try to figure out, I think, as a group, how we want this sort of structured, and maybe some things that we have that are here that we sort of think about what we need that's around them, right? Donna and I have been sitting around this committee for a very long time where we've seen meetings go till 10 o'clock at night because there's a lot to discuss, because special education has its ebbs and flows. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not.
10 at home at midnight.
Yeah, no, we absolutely have. So that's not something a lot of people around this table have seen, because the meetings themselves, they actually shortened during COVID because it was online, and anybody who sat in the meeting during COVID realized there was very little interaction going on. It wasn't until we came back around this big table where we're all in person that flow of conversation started again. And so now the meetings have been ticking a little bit longer because people are feeling, who are bringing more down to the table, right? So one of the things I had asked is that we be honest and say the meeting's going to at least 8:30, right? Which is what it would be scheduled for in previously 2 hours. But I think we also, yes, we should raise these frustrations and concerns, absolutely. But I think we also have to say, like, we need to start looking at it, even as ourselves a standard. Donna knows, and Tara, who had to go, also knows, we spent one summer working on a standard that was sent to the province. The question is, do we take some of that and look at it as a board, regardless of whether the province makes a standard, to look at what things are needed to make that flow? Because I think that's part of the problem, is there isn't always a standard, and anybody here will attest that different parents get different information depending on who they talk to, right? Everything from a child has to log 100 hours on the laptop in order to qualify for a SEAC laptop, or on a computer. I know kids that's happened to a while ago, right? Donna. To kids who are just parents, they see a need and go, okay, let's bring in the OT and do the work. And they've been approved pretty quickly for a laptop. So different people are being told different things for different reasons. And that's where we need to start looking. But the one big problem we discovered during that whole process that we spent summer working on was that the school board, and this is a ministry thing, but the school board cannot sort of dictate PD unless it's a mandate from the province. So the school board can't say every teacher must take so many spec ed PD sessions. That has to be a provincial mandated PD. And that's a bit of a problem, because there's lots who just don't take it. It's offered, but it's not taken, right? So that's a bit of a problem.
But the school board can say, at this particular PD session on this day, we want you to do autism and sensory awareness. Here's the criteria. Here's the curriculum I want you to teach the teachers.
I think those are PD sessions that are.
There's a difference. Yeah, there are two different things we're talking. One is a PA day, which often is planned and delivered by the board, and then there's a PD day, which is a provincially mandated learning. Right, two different things, but right. But we can offer workshops for teachers on our PA days, but they're not mandatory. Yes.
Yes. And just on that note, the PD days, there's a memorandum that goes out every year in the province. These are the things you must focus on prevention. And it's three of those days are provincially mandated. PD days or PA days, I don't know what you're going to pay with it. But anyways, there's three of them. And this is what you have to cover. And so that's the other, the other issue too.
Can also be covered in staff meetings as well. Right?
Yeah, I know.
There were two more community concerns brought forward.
I would like to save them, because it was me who brought them forward. I would like to save them for next time if that's possible.
Okay.
I would also like to make a suggestion based on everything that I've heard said about this process. So at Grandview, they are very kind of on the cutting edge, kind of in this like children's services. There's kind of this wave happening, this difference of how to involve parents and how to get parent feedback. And Grandview is kind of on the cutting edge of that. SEAC Kids and CAMH are starting now to kind of come on board with that. And it's really about moving past like the tokenistic, like we're consulting by like telling you what and presenting something in a way that you're going to tell us back what we already know and we want to hear, and kind of like a pat on the head, like, oh, look, we consulted people, and really consulting in a meaningful way to get feedback and make actual change in the organization. And one of the ways that Grandview has committed to do that is at our meetings, when concerns are brought up, they say within 2 weeks, we are going to have a written response to address back to the committee members to let you know how we are going to deal with this issue. And then it becomes actionable, and then we can follow up on it if it's not being implemented. But so far, for the last couple of years, it's been extremely effective. And we notice at our meetings, there's fewer complaints now because everything's just been addressed and things are working very smoothly in the organization. Parents are happier, the committee's happier, the staff is happier, and we keep working through that process. So I think it would be great if concerns are brought forward. If we do need to like schedule it as like, okay, next meeting, we're going to make this an action item because we actually do need some kind of a feedback on how to implement this. But if there doesn't need to really be feedback and it's like, okay, clearly we just have to send out a memorandum to everybody saying this is what you need to do in this situation, then that's really easy to just respond to clearly in writing to everybody, and it just holds everybody accountable and takes away it like removes the issue, right?
Can I connect with you, Shauna, about that further, just to learn a little bit more?
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. This is like, yeah, because I agree with you, right? Sometimes it is just a saying. I followed up with, the score we sent out a, and then that something was actually done. Okay. We're gonna hold the other community concerns then over to the next meeting. Celebrations and successes, really quick.
Sorry. Can I just ask that we move those community concerns though, like earlier?
I drew an arrow.
Okay, yeah, we've done that. I'm gonna throw out one that, super excited to have my daughter sort of stepping in as an alternate and sort of learning that role for a student who's actually through the actual system and the gifted program, but with alternate identifications as well. Super excited for that, and super excited for her having started her full-time job with participation. So, which is a assisted living facility or adults with special needs. So, yeah. So that's it for me. Our next meeting is on October 16th. Right here. And we just need a motion to adjourn. All in favor? See you later, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.